All right, welcome. This is the third part of CFT's discussion series. We're going to be talking about Pretendians, Defendians, and reface. I really appreciate everyone joining. Hopefully, you're safe and warm this morning. We got a little bit of snow here in Ohio, last hurrah of winter. And this is recorded, so we will post this to our Facebook account. We have a YouTube channel now, so you can find it there. You can also find it on our new website, cftohio.org. We started with a discussion about American Indian historical interpretation. Then we moved into a discussion that talked about the roles of women in American Indian historical interpretation. And today we're going to discuss, some of the cultural issues that have kind of plagued this realm of what CFT does for a long time, maybe forever, with the culture, at least in the Ohio Valley region. So, really happy to bring our final guest in here for this last episode. His name is Jeremy Turner. Jeremy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Jeremy Turner. I'm a citizen of the Shawnee Tribe, also Wyandotte Nation descendant, and have Cayuga ancestry as well from Seneca Cayuga Nation. I've been involved in living history reenactments for, I don't know, 20 some odd years, and I'm an outdoorsman. This is my first love, my first passion. I love to trap, fish, hunt, get outside and enjoy the outdoors with my family. We have a small hobby farm here in Indiana where we have gardens and get to grow traditional foods, have horses, chickens. So we're kind of out and about outside every day and doing a lot of material culture things that I'm interested in, from like the 18th century material culture that revolve around that outdoor lifestyle, as tanning skins, hunting, trapping, all of that kind of stuff. I enjoy using 18th century knowledge and material culture and testing that stuff out in the woods, especially when I'm hunting and trapping and stuff. And so that's kind of fueled my passion for research and learning all that I have learned over the years, and steered me to where I am today, I guess. So
Yeah. And Jeremy is also the vice president of Cedars Ford Theater. So we'll get a little bit more into my relationship with Jeremy and how CFT has become an American Indian-led organization after we discuss some of these topics later on. And of course, we'll always leave time for comments and feedback. So please feel free to drop that in the comment section. We do ask that you mute your mic if you come on. I apologize. I'm trying to get to it as you do log on, but we will have time for questions at the end of this. So please keep track of those notes, and I promise we'll get to as many or all that we can here at the end. Like I said, Jeremy is the VP of CFT, and I'm a projects director slash playwright. I've written and directed some of our films and the planned production. Jeremy and I collaborated to put that together with language interpretation, but with Talon Silverhorn. So again, we'll get more into our relationship and what we're doing to hopefully address some of these issues in a positive way moving forward. But as we discussed some of these topics, Jeremy and I felt that it was necessary to kind of discuss these things out in the open so that people have an understanding of maybe the right direction to go in if you're looking for proper interpretation and authentic American Indian voices at your organization or whatever production you're looking to perform. So hopefully this helps, moving forward for anybody that's interested in doing better and improving our understanding of our shared history. So, Jeremy, do you have anything to add to that?
No, let's get started.
Okay. So I'm going to read off. I have notes here that I'm going to go through that kind of breaks down each of those subjects, the cultural phenomenon of pretendianism, defendianism, and then red face performance art with a couple questions for each subject. And then, like I said, if you do have comments or questions, put them in the chat box here with the Zoom link, and then we'll get to them later. So starting off, the Pretendian. I have a few clips I'm going to play throughout this, and the first one I'm going to play it's available on YouTube, and it kind of it really gets to the heart of some of the inaccuracies and the portrayals that Pretendians perform. This is from a film called White Shamans and Plastic Medicine Men. It was produced in 1996, if you're unfamiliar with it. And it's kind of it's a real interesting critique of pretendianism. So without further ado, I'm gonna share this with you guys, and then Jeremy and I are gonna discuss what's in it and some other questions. So bear with me 1 second here.
You can always tell a white person when they give the Indian name. It's always these Hollywood type of names, you know, a Rolling Thunder or Swift Deer or yeah, you can always tell that kind of stuff, and they're always English names, so to speak. I think that's ridiculous because they don't know the reason why they have names. They don't have naming ceremonies.
The name come to me when I was writing something about my grandmother. And I kept thinking about other names, other things, other things. And this little voice said, nope, you are Winfield.
Those people, Brooke Medicine Eagle, Jim Silver Eagle, why don't they pick up a name like Bloody Guts? Something that doesn't have that ring of power and spirituality.
My name is Skyhawk Oyela. My Anglo-Saxon name is Rosal. And I'm a Métis medicine woman of Blackfoot and Ojibwa heritage.
I got my name on my vision quest, and
All right, I apologize. Was that not sharing? Because it didn't look like it was.
It wasn't. Yeah, you couldn't see any video.
Okay. Could you hear it though?
Yeah, we could hear it.
Okay. Give me 1 second. My computer's acting funny. Sorry.
You're muted, Kane.
Sorry. So again, I apologize. For some reason, it wasn't sharing the video, it was only doing the audio. Again, it's White Shamans and Plastic Medicine Men. It's about a half-hour video that really breaks down the kind of like the new age, kind of like the hippie folks that sell themselves as shamans and pretend to be American Indians in that realm to make money. So it's worth a look if you wanna check that out. You know, Jeremy, I know you've seen that film a bunch of times. Like, what would be your summary of that film?
Actually, I haven't seen that film.
You haven't?
Oh,
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you'd seen it.
watched
All
it.
right. Well, we'll talk about that at a later date. So let's just jump right into our discussion. You know, so the pretendian issue, it seems like there's a lot of folks that just claim to be American Indian. Uh, you know, Jeremy, you break this down better than anybody. Can somebody just self-identify as an American Indian, like on a census form, and that's it, and that's who you are?
No, that's not how it works, because being an American Indian is not tied to, you know, an ethnic or a racial classification. It's not something that you can just self-identify as. Being an American Indian is a unique political status, and it is equivalent to being a member of another country. Okay, so just like France or
Hmm.
you know, Japan, China, you cannot claim to be a citizen of Indians. You just can't self-identify as being an American Indian without being recognized and accepted into that federally recognized tribal community that you claim to be from. There is, people are always going to find the the instances where someone is not an enrolled citizen of a federally recognized tribe, and use that to point out that not every American Indian person is actually enrolled, and that's absolutely true, because every American Indian nation has its own constitution, and in that constitution that sets forth what the criteria is that they use for their citizenship status, their enrollment. Some tribes do use blood quantum, and the tribes that do use blood quantum, those are the ones where most often people kind of fit that mold of being an American Indian, but not an enrolled citizen. But they still, they may be less than, like, for example, Navajo Nation has a 1/4 blood quantum minimum to be enrolled. There are many Navajo people that are less than that 1/4, but are still connected to the Navajo Nation, still involved with their families, still have ties to the Navajo Nation, but may not be an enrolled citizen. So there are examples where there are exceptions to the rule, right? So that's what I'm trying to point out. But of every one of those ones that are exceptions like that, they can actually physically show through records and documents that they are tied to that federally recognized nation, and blood family that are still enrolled citizens of that nation. So that's where the self-identification is taken right out of the realm of possibility. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the experience that I've had growing up and living here in Ohio is that, because of tribal nations removal nearly 200 years ago, folks here are, until the internet age, have been, for the most part, totally disconnected with tribal communities. And they've, people here in Ohio that claim to be Shawnee, for example, a lot of times their story is that their ancestors stayed behind, like they hid out, right? When the Shawnee tribes were removed by the United States government to go, excuse me, to go west. What would how would you explain to somebody if I said, my ancestor did that. They hid out, they suppressed their identity, and now, now they feel like they're comfortable enough to claim to be Shawnee based on who their ancestor was. How would you explain to somebody that that's not true?
I would say that's absolutely false information. In every case, the historical record disproves that. The primary documents disprove that. In every case where tribes were forcibly removed from their historic homelands, There's nobody better at keeping records than the federal government, the United States federal government, period. They keep very good records because, especially in the case of American Indian nations, they have responsibilities to those nations based on treaties and agreements that allow the people, the American citizens, to live where they do. You know what I mean? They're all tied to the land. And so every one of those agreements with the tribes that got land for the U.S. is tied to a treaty.
Sorry, we got a little connection issue. Jeremy, can you hear me there? So while we get Jeremy back, there seems to be, again, this cultural phenomenon of getting the stage per se. If you claim to be somebody that's in a tribal nation like the Shawnee here in Ohio, and unfortunately, it creates this misconception of who is an American Indian. It's an unfortunate circumstance where the audience is confused, and for somebody like myself that grew up in Ohio, that's basically our education about tribal nations stops in the fourth grade here. We just kind of go with whatever's presented, and for the most part, it's geared towards children, and we kind of get in this belief system that folks that claim to be American Indians are American Indians, and being from the Midwest, it's kind of rude to question people, if they claim to be that identity. But to really better our educational system and better what we're trying to accomplish with CFT, to have a more accurate representation of American Indian voices, we have to vet that process, and that's what part of what Jeremy's work is to have those tough conversations with people that either want to be involved with CFT or have a competing interest with CFT. Those conversations have to happen with the organization that we're working with, and just simply ask, are you sure the people you're working with are American Indians? And I can speak from my perspective. There's a lot of anxiety from the organizations that I've worked with, whether they're parks or theaters or endowment grantor organizations, because nobody really wants to do something that could be considered a discriminatory act towards American Indians. People are looking for diverse perspectives and voices, so they want to include American Indian voices in their productions and their exhibits and whatnot. But a lot of times they don't know how to contact the proper channels to get those voices at their organization. So if we can get Jeremy had some technical issues. I'll try to get him back on here, because this is really meant for Jeremy and our other CFT board members to have this platform to kind of speak for themselves. So,
Sorry.
are you back?
Yeah. So for whatever reason, the Wi-Fi went down.
Oh, that's great timing.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me finish what I was trying to say.
Yeah, go on. Just so Jeremy, what I was starting to talk about is my perspective, linking folks like yourself with organizations here, and the confusion that organizations have trying to find those accurate American Indian voices, right? So
Yeah.
just to get you caught up on what I was covering while you were gone, but yeah,
Okay.
go back to what you were saying, man.
So what I was trying to say is that the federal government kept great records, and at treaties they recorded who was there, tribal citizens and stuff. And then later on they took more thorough tribal roles. The Indian agent, would go and actually physically see who was on these reservations, who was living there, who was members of it. The families would report that. For example, in Ohio, with all of the tribes that lived there, 1817 was one of the first year that all heads of household were enumerated. So the year 1817 was the year basically when the tribes that were in Ohio, who had been involved in the War of 1812, the federal government came in and renegotiated, made new treaties with the tribes in Ohio to put them all at peace with whether they were the ones that fought against the United States with the British or with the Americans against the British. It didn't matter. The federal U.S. government came in and made new treaties with all the tribes in Ohio after the end of the War of 1812. So in 1817, there was a series of treaties with all the tribal communities that were still in Ohio. And that treaty established large reservations in Northwest Ohio for the tribes that were still there. The Shawnees, the Wyandots, Seneca Cayugas, a few Delawares that were there near the Wyandots, the Ottawas. And what it did in that 1817 treaty is it listed, so it established the reservations, and then it said that each head of household or each household will get an equal share of the reservation. So basically be allotted a portion of the reservation. And it went through and it named every head of household on that reservation who had a plot of land on there. Some were widowed women with kids, some were full families, mothers, fathers, and kids. Some were elders that didn't have any kids, but they were all listed on those on the 1817 treaty under each individual tribe. So you also knew what reservation each person lived on and what tribe they were, that they belonged to. And some of it may have only had their American Indian name, their Shawnee name, their Wyandotte name. But a lot of them, by that time, tribal citizens had American names and, whatever language or tribe they belonged to had their secondary, their primary name, and then an English secondary name that they were known by. So you can look at that 1817 treaty, and it's very fascinating, especially for tribal citizens and genealogists, researchers, and stuff like that. That will show you who lived on the reservation, who was a part of it, and so that is one early way to keep a record of who was who and who's actually a tribal citizen. And what we're talking about is that to be an American Indian, you have to prove that you're descended from these folks, who were involved and were, documented as being American Indians in the historic period. And you do that with birth and death certificates. You have to do that with official records. It's not just hearsay. It's not family stories. It's not family lore. None of that qualifies. It's got to be official primary records. So, that's very interesting, that 1817 treaty does that. And then when every tribe was forcibly removed from its reservation, they also took an account of the tribal citizens on the reservation that were being removed and going, west of the Mississippi is what what those treaties at that time said in the 1830s during Andrew Jackson's Indian Removal Acts. And so you had what's known as a muster roll. Every tribe that went west had a muster roll, and there are great historical documents. The original documents exist of the muster rolls, but there are also books that exist out there that write down and have facsimiles of these muster rolls, and they record it so that people could research it and stuff like that. For example, the Wyandots, they were the last tribe to leave forcibly be removed from Ohio in 1843. All of the other tribes had left and been forced to leave in the 1830s. And the Wyandots, because at that point were so much, what was the term I'm trying to, term I'm looking for here? They're very much like their white neighbors, right? They're very much, the Methodist Church was huge on the Wyandotte Reservation in Ohio. A lot of Wyandots were Methodists by that time. Were involved.
Are you talking about being like assimilated?
Yes, they were there. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. They were very assimilated by that time. And so during the Indian removal period, they were able to push off being removed west of Mississippi based on a lot of that. You know, a lot of their neighbors, their white neighbors, stood up and said, hey, these people are like us. You know what I mean? That there's no need for them to be forced to go west, that kind of stuff. But then there was an event that happened in the winter of 1841 where some family members were murdered by some white folks up in northwest Ohio. They killed Samundawat, who had been a chief and was a Methodist preacher at that time, Methodist minister. They killed him. They killed one of my relatives. Her name was Nancy Coon. She was married to Samundawat's brother-in-law. He was a Seneca guy. His name was, some records call him Two Feathers, and others are Tall Fighter, the records call him. And but anyway, there were a group of men that came into their camp. They were out at their winter hunting camp, and they came into their camp, said they were lost. There was like 6 of them, of the local frontiersmen, said they were lost. Said they wanted them to show them to the trail to get them back home. Samundawat said, hey, it's getting dark. Why don't you guys camp overnight with us? And Nancy will fix dinner for us. And then in the morning, I'll show you guys to the trail. So they did that. They had dinner with them. Samundawat said a prayer before they went to bed, Christian prayer. And they all went to bed. And in the middle of the night, those 6 men got up and they shot Samundawat and Tall Fighter in their blankets, shot them to death, and they chased Nancy out into the woods and they tomahawked her to death. They then took their scalps and took their bodies and tried to hide them in some tree throws, cover them up with logs and stuff like that. Samundawat had a large group of hunting dogs that were all the local frontiersmen had been rumored to try him. They wanted to buy him. He wouldn't sell them. That was his way of making a living. They took those hunting dogs, they took all their furs, and they got out of there. Well, a few days later, some Wyandots that were traveling back and forth from a hunting camp found their bodies, tracked them, found out which way they went to the Indian agent, John Johnston, told him what was going on. They took a militia, or, a small group of men, and they went and arrested these men. They found, at their cabin, they found the dogs, they found the furs that were hidden in the floorboard, under their cabin in the cellar. And so they arrested these men, and but the men were, well known in the community. They were friendly with the community members, and the community members had a posse come and bust them loose from this jail. And these men fled. And one of the records that I have from Ohio says that a couple of the men fled to the place where all scoundrels go, and that's Texas. So they labeled Texas as a real outlaw place that ruffians and people that are lawless go and live, which kind of makes sense to why Texas is the way it is today. But, who am I to judge? But that's what they said in 1841. Anyway, none of these men were ever held accountable for that. And the Wyandotte Nation as a people decided that next, after council that next year, that no matter what we do, we got to, these people aren't going to accept us. We're not going to be allowed to live here peacefully. They want our land. They want us gone. And so they acquiesced to be removed. So 1843, the summer, they created it was a muster roll, and all the Wyandots from Upper Sandusky and most of the Wyandots from Detroit area, the Androdon Reservation, left and went west of the Mississippi to Kansas. And so the point is that they just didn't disappear and leave. there was records of all of the heads of households and how many people they had in their families that were enumerated on these muster rolls. So it was well documented who was leaving, who was a member of the community. And then what happened after they were forced to go west, surveyors from the state of Ohio came in and they surveyed the reservation, and they surveyed it, and they took an account of what improvements were on the reservation, cabins that were built, fields that were cleared, orchards that were there. And I have, that original document is in the state of Ohio and their land office there in Wyandotte County. But I have a copy of that. And it's very interesting in that it shows where every family member's allotment was, all based off of that 1817 treaty that I was telling you about, and it names what family lived here, what they had, what state, what their cabin was in, what state their fields were in. Did they have orchards? Did they have a spring on their farm? That kind of stuff. So that was all well documented, and so that was, the Wyandottes weren't the only ones that had that happen, right? So that was a whole process of removal is what all of these tribes had to do. And so people that are interested in learning about the Shawnees experience and that, there have been a couple researchers that have put out books that describe the removal itself from the soldiers' point of view who went with the tribal communities west, right? They were to escort the tribal communities west of the Mississippi, and they talk about some of the horrible experiences that these families were made to endure as they were forced to go west of the Mississippi. So that's a long answer to how I would address that, but I just wanted people to understand that it's not myth, it's not hocus pocus, it's not magic. This stuff is well documented.
It comes down to accounting and
Yes.
It's a science, right?
Yeah.
It was a science to what was happening, and it was a tragic set of circumstances that led to that point. And I think. Oh, by the way, Jeremy, your video's off. Could you turn your video
Sorry.
on? There you go. Again, I'll speak as somebody that grew up here in Ohio. What would you say to people then that are doing this kind of behavior as a pretendian, supposing to be you and that identity as a way to honor that history? Do you think is it a noble effort, or is it a contentious kind of thing that is untruthful when they say that they're honoring American Indians, specifically people that are citizens of the tribes that were forcibly removed from Ohio?
First off, I would say stop. Period. Stop. And no, it's not an honor. There are families and people among our communities that are perfectly capable of, telling our story and are knowledgeable and well-versed and, can tell our story and should be the ones that are telling our story. You definitely are not honoring a people when you dress up in red face and you promote stereotypes, which you have no idea what you're talking about. The real issue about, the people that are involved in these reenactments and portraying themselves as American Indians, a lot of the times, I've been to a lot of these reenactments for a long time. I've heard, a lot of what these people are telling the public and that kind of stuff. And, it's their chance to be famous for a week. And it really is. A lot of these reenactors, it's, them getting not to be a construction worker for the weekend and getting to be somebody that all the kids want to have their photos taken with, and a lot of these folks that are involved in that don't have that in their day-to-day lives. So it really is about them gaining notoriety. And, you know, we've seen that recently in people we've dealt with that are involved in that. So you know exactly what I'm talking about, Kane, and other people that are on this call that are living his, you know, been involved in living history, know exactly what I'm talking about and seen it themselves. You know, we see these people tell the public that they really are American Indians when we know they're not, you know, but they're promoting themselves. And again, it's their chance to be famous and get in the newspaper for the weekend and, you know, play a life that's not theirs, you know. They have no ties to the actual tribal communities that they're claiming to be from. They're not involved in the tribal communities. They, you know, they may have read some historical documents, but they don't fully comprehend, you know, what is written in those documents because they don't come from a real tribal background that understands these things. You know, you have to be able to put those things, those pieces together to really understand those primary accounts, you know. And probably the biggest issue, you know, you and I have talked about this a lot, Kane, is the public comes to these living history events with, you know, a partial interest in history, right? That's probably what drew them to that event in the first place is, you know, they are interested in the history. But then when they get there and they start interacting with reenactors or us, inevitably, all of their questions that they ask turn to modern day the tribal communities in our modern day time. You know, what are tribes doing today? What's going on here and there today? And that is where these folks that are, you know, pretendians and doing red face, that's where they really do damage to the communities, you know, because they have no idea of what's going on in the tribal communities today. They're not involved in them, and they make up stuff, tell what they think they've seen on TV or read on the internet, or, you know, but, you know, it doesn't come from a place of knowledge of being involved, you know, and they're not fully vested in it. You know, they have no vested interest in what's going on in those tribal communities because they're not a part of it, you know.
Yeah.
And so that's some of the main damage, as far as I'm concerned, that happens.
That's my next question was, what do tribal citizens and non-tribal citizens lose from the beliefs of pretendians? Like, what's the result of that? You know, I can speak again as an Ohioan. There's just a mass amount of confusion, and generally speaking, most people, they don't want to stand out and be rude and go, "Are you a real American Indian? Are you lying to us?" Right? So we know that the responsibility is typically on the organization to vet this process, but, you know, because it doesn't happen generally, and it's not, you know, taken serious enough. You know, what do you think that both sides, both communities lose out of this process?
Well, for the public in general, they lose first and foremost authenticity. You know, authenticity that they're talking to a genuine community member whose family came from that area, went through the history that, you know, the people are interested in learning about, has a vested interest in, you know, accurately getting their story told. So that's first and foremost what's lost to the public, is that authenticity. But also on top of that, it's from the tribal citizens' perspective, if these events are, you know, continuous or continued to be done by non-tribal citizens, people that are not connected to the community, then there is less of a chance for real tribal citizens to come in and participate in this. And one of the things that, you know, I like about Caesars Ford Theater and has really drawn me to Caesars Ford Theater is giving tribal citizens the opportunity to come back to their homelands. You know what I mean? To be in a place where their ancestors lived, and to see the areas that their ancestors were forced to leave, and to experience that. A lot of tribal citizens obviously live west of the Mississippi because of those forced removals. And many that still live in like Oklahoma or Texas or Kansas, the states that surround Oklahoma, have never had the opportunity to come back to Ohio, have never seen Ohio or Pennsylvania or Kentucky. And so tribal citizens lose the ability to be connected to their historic homelands, And so that's one of the things that, drew me, like I said, to Caesars Ford Theater, is creating those opportunities. As we go on, my hope is to create more and more opportunities that can get more and more tribal citizens from all of the tribes that were forcibly removed from the Ohio River Valley to come back to their historic homelands and see the places where their ancestors lived and died, and experience them, you know what I mean? And continue to experience them and build relationships and stuff. And by doing that, we take that mystery out of being an American Indian, that it's not so mysterious anymore when you have tribal citizens that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis in your face. That creates less of the ability for people to come in and pull off this red face and pretendianism and all that, when you have bona fide people right there, that will call that bluff.
Yeah, through my experience for the last several years working with you and CFT, it is amazing how quickly the audience, and specifically the organization that creates that event for the audience, how quickly they realize, like, oh, this is the right way to do it. This is not only fun and educational and just a good time, but this is the way we do everything else, right? I mean, we have, unfortunately, in the Ohio River Valley, a lot of institutions, up until recently, for the most part, just treat American Indian history like it's folklore and not, a real thing that all you got to do is just get on the internet and contact folks, that are part of these communities. It does take a little more effort. And like you said, it is work to bring folks back here to their historic homelands. I mean, we know firsthand it takes a lot of money to do that work. That's why our GoFundMe is specifically for that expense of travel and accommodations, because American Indians should not have to pay their own way to come back to their homelands they were forcibly removed from.
Absolutely.
And so that's another step that these organizations have to take if they're sincere about doing this the right way for educational purposes. It takes money, and that's a commitment. So no one's saying this is easy, no, but we do, I think, through the power of the internet, like this is an example of it. We have the ability to make platforms for people in situations where you don't have to travel. Is it the same thing as meeting somebody and shaking their hand? No. But we can have experiences now that get to the root of it. So if you are an organization or know of somebody in an organization that wants to better this culture in that way, please reach out to us, cftohio.org. You can contact us or message us through Facebook. But, we're always looking for more folks that want to do this work together, because like Jeremy said, once you meet somebody in person that's a real Shawnee citizen, that can connect you with what's happening today, not just in a historic lens, it changes the way you perceive a lot of these things. And it makes the folks that do pretendian performances, for some reason it doesn't instinctually hit us this way, but it's really a mockery is the way I see it now. I grew up in Ohio. as a kid, I went to these things. You're not really formally educated about what it is. You know, my parents did a good job in a general way, but you just kind of meld into the rest of the pot in this culture. But once you really get a firm understanding of what's happening today with tribal nations and their citizens, and meet people and build those relationships, those performances by Pretendians, it really does come across as mockery. That's just recently something happened on Facebook. I'm not going to name any names, but it was truly embarrassing how a school system can have that in their schools, educating 5, 6, 7 year olds, and and they're just playing this character supposing to be an identity that they're not, and these kids don't know any different, you know. It's not their responsibility, it's the adults' responsibility. Um, so yeah, we got a long way to go, but slowly organizations are recognizing this is a better way, and hopefully everyone will benefit. Later on we'll talk a little bit about what we have planned for this year and some things that we'd like to see happen that we need help with. But Jeremy, unless you have something to add to the Pretendian subject, could we move forward to the Defendian subject?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so in your opinion, as an American Indian, Jeremy, why would an American Indian take the side of a Pretendian?
Well, I think there's probably a couple reasons. I think one can easily be tied to monetary. You know, a lot of the Pretendians, whether it be in living history or uh, academics, or performative, whether it be, like showbiz or music. Um, I don't, is somebody's still not muted that needs muted? Because I'm getting some background noise. Please make sure your microphone is muted. Um, I'm, if someone, if they're tied to a Pretendian that promotes them and pays them to do programming and stuff like that with them, that's obviously the most obvious reason for someone to defend Pretendian. It's a monetary source of income for them. So that's number one. Number two is that Defendian may, remember how I was talking about earlier about, there are examples where there are real American Indian people who do not qualify for enrollment in their community because of the constitution of the tribe, and a lot of times it's tied to blood quantum issues. And so they may be sensitive to that issue because it may hit close to home for them or someone in their family. And so they take up these issues without even verifying that these Pretendians are in the where they're at because of that, that's the issue. You know what I mean? That the Pretendian may tell them that's the issue, but it's not really, you know what I mean? And they're not verifying. So I think those are a couple of the big reasons why, there are Defendians and why they do that.
So different angles, mainly for personal motivations.
Yeah.
We've had a couple questions just simply defining what a Pretendian, what that term is, and what the term Defendian is. Jeremy, can you put it in your words as succinctly as you can so we can?
Yeah. So I think Jeff Pavlik that's asking that. So I wrote some points down so that I can make sure I hit most of them. A Pretendian is basically someone that portrays himself as an American Indian or a tribal descendant without actually being a tribal citizen or a recognized descendant of a federally recognized nation. So that's the key to it. They're either not a citizen or they're not a recognized. So, you could say you're a descendant all day long, and anybody can claim that. But unless the tribe and, the tribal community, the federally recognized tribal community who you're claiming descent from, unless they recognize that in some way, whether some tribes officially do that. They will print up a letter on their tribal letterhead that this person is a descendant. You know what I mean? Some tribes do that, not all of them, but a few tribes will do that. Some tribes will, just as long as you're involved in the functions of the community, whether that be ceremonially or around their different community organizations. If you're involved in that with your family who may be enrolled, or that is proof of descendancy. So those are the examples that qualify somebody, to be a descendant, to list themselves as a descendant, that they're actually, like I said, acknowledged by the tribal community and families as being a legitimate descendant. They know the family that person is descended from. So that's what a pretendian is. A defendian is, just like what we were just saying, is an actual American Indian person who defends a known pretendian, and tries to defend them against other Indians that have called them out, and that could be for monetary reasons, or it could be for personal reasons where they don't feel comfortable, like we just talked about. So that's an example of what a defendian is. Red face is it could be most usually it's a pretendian that goes to either powwows or living history events and dresses up in powwow regalia or 18th century clothing at a living history event, and pretends that they are American Indians, tells the public that they're an American Indian or they're a descendant or whatever. So that's what red face is, and it is no different than blackface. Blackface is a huge no-no, rightfully so, in modern day society, where we understand the damage that those stereotypes and pretending to be, an African American when you're not, by putting on black shoe polish and stuff that we used to see happen all the time, in comedy, in TV. No one in their right mind today would ever think of doing that. You know what I mean? Or think that's okay. And if you say that, if someone says that they would, they're not playing with a full deck of cards. You know what I mean? Somebody that would say that they're not being honest, or they're not all there to begin with. Because that is not the case. Nobody in their right mind would do that in today's in today's standards and stuff. You would be destroyed. You'd be called out, destroyed, right? So it's no different doing red face, but for some odd reason, the public is not outraged about that. You know what I mean? And that is the problem with being an American Indian, is American Indian people are the smallest minority that exists, So the community in general, the broader American Indian community as a whole, doesn't have a whole lot of voice power in the general media and public and the United States, for that reason, because they're in the minority. So tribal communities absolutely need non-tribal allies, friends, to help them in these cases, right? And right now, that's just not there to raise the awareness for the problems with red face, And I think that so many modern day American people are so confused about who an actual American Indian person is anyway. They don't know the difference. They don't know any better. They don't know what, because we have, for example, like the mascot issue that's happening, all over in major sports and stuff. they're always interviewing these Pretendian people about it's always these people saying that their grandmother was a Cherokee, or you know, they have an ancestor that was an Indian. That I don't see the harm in these, you know, them using the tomahawk chop, or I don't see a harm in them using the image of, you know, the Kansas City Chiefs or the Indianapolis Indians, or you know what I mean. They're asking Pretendians what they think, and those are who they're interviewing for comment in the news, media, and all that. So you're getting a really skewed sense of what Indians really want. You know what I mean? What they really want. So that is the issue. That's a huge issue. On top of that, we have people like that are really taking real issues in American Indian society and co-opting them and using them for their own personal benefits. For example, two of the biggest ones are this missing, murdered, and indigenous women, you know, which is a real issue in American Indian communities. But the whole point of that missing, murdered, indigenous women is that those women fall into that area of gray space because they are just that, citizens of federally recognized tribes, most often living on or near their reservation. And there are specific laws that apply on reservations that do not apply to American citizens. And there are specific laws in the federal government that are only for American Indians based on the Code of Federal Regulations, 25, is if anybody is interested in looking it up. Code of Federal Regulations, 25 dash, you know, and there's a bunch of them. So that's a whole section of United States federal code that are only applies to American Indian people. And that's who we're talking about, people that are citizens of federally recognized tribes or their descendants, their documented descendants, you know. So these people that co-opt that, you most often are members of non-recognized nonprofit organizations. They call, you know, the term has been coined to call them CPAINs, corporations posing as American Indian nations. And they're the ones that are the loudest, I think, about this missing and murdered and indigenous women's issue. And they're all over the country. A lot of these nonprofit organizations that claim to be tribes are on the East Coast because of removal. They're in states that touch the Atlantic Ocean, basically. So all of these states along the eastern seaboard where tribes were forcibly removed from, except for one or two cases here and there where federally recognized tribes still exist in those, you know, on those states. These nonprofit organizations claiming to be tribes have popped up. They're the scourge of Indian country. They really are. And tribal communities, federally recognized tribal communities, are fighting them tooth and nail right now, but they are embedded very well. And so because they've been doing this for a long time, right? And they've got money and they've hoodwinked people, even senators in their own states and stuff, because they can give votes. They can guarantee large population of votes. And you know, so you got politicians in your pocket willing to do things for you for these, you know, CPAIN groups. But anyway, these CPAIN groups a lot of times are, you know, saying that their women are missing, murdered, and indigenous, when in fact, the whole political structure and, you know, the laws that are there that creates the issue of missing, murder, and indigenous women does not exist with them. It does not apply to them. They do not live on reservations where, you know, federal jurisdiction does, you know what I mean, and state jurisdiction have issues. That's the whole issue with a real reservation. Land held in trust by the federal government for a tribe creates jurisdictional issues between the state and, you know, law enforcement and the tribe, right? And so that's these loopholes, that's these gray areas that these real American Indian women that are murdered and kidnapped and all of that fall into, that they cannot, especially when they're forcibly taken from the reservation, that, they fall into that creates that whole issue, right? And, these fake groups, because it's becoming a big topic and on modern day social media and in the news, these C-Pain groups, they latch onto that and they use that to promote themselves as being American Indian communities to the public that doesn't understand why these laws exist that create the issue in the first place. You know what I mean? And that's exactly why. I mean, we're coming from a period of time this last year where there was a movie that brought this whole issue to the center stage for America, and that was, the Reign of Terror, with the movie Killers of the Flower Moon with Leonardo DiCaprio and the Osage, that was just, put out this last year, that shows some of those jurisdictional issues, and that was the whole purpose for the FBI to be created. If people did not realize that, watch that movie. The FBI did not exist until the federal government sent investigators to Oklahoma to investigate the murders of the Osage people by their frontier and white citizens around them. So the whole federal FBI agency was created specifically to deal with crimes on reservations in Indian country, and that is what they still do today. They have jurisdiction on that, So those are issues that citizens, general citizens of the United States do not understand that, because it's not well known, because it only affects American Indian people that are in this unique political status, right? That's what we're talking about here. And so that's a huge issue that these fake groups co-opt. And then another issue that these fake groups co-opt is land back. This whole land back thing that's going on all over. And land back issue is, what tribal communities are asking and looking for any organization or a landowner in their historic homelands that wants to, give back land to the tribal community that was forcibly removed from it, right? And there are examples of that happening across the country. And I would argue and say, I don't think that there's been any research on it, but I am willing to bet that if there was someone that seriously dug into it and did research, that more land has been given back to these fake organizations, these C-Pains with no American Indian ancestry, than any real tribal community. You know what I mean? That's who's getting land back is groups that have banded together and got not-profit status and call themselves a tribe. And they're the ones that are back in these historic homelands where the tribes were forcibly removed west to, and they're the ones that are making these land back deals. You know what I mean? I know of a handful of them right off the top of my head that are examples of it, So those are two big issues that are being caused by these Pretendians and the Defendians that are involved in that. You know what I mean? They get involved in that too, because especially in a lot of the big cities in the East where they have these centers, these American Indian centers, Pretendians and Defendians are one and the same in those American Indian centers in these big cities. They usually work hand in hand in the same organization. And, most of the big cities in the East are not validating that the people that are hanging around them are actual American Indians. They're letting people that self-identify. And so these are all chances for those people to falsify and get stereotypical and non-accurate information out to the general public,
Yeah, you were talking about C-Pains. This question is kind of more geared toward like activist groups, but we've discussed this a few times because we've run into this, and the theme is just undermining legitimate American Indian perspectives, right? And the real culture of American Indians. So This question is, how do activist groups sometimes undermine the political sovereignty of tribal nations when they validate pretendians with terms like the collective or indigenous?
Well, it comes back to, like I was just saying, they don't verify, in these collectives, in these groups, they don't verify that these people are actually American Indian people or citizens of, tribes, legitimate tribes and stuff. So that's one point of it. And a lot of times you'll see that with the term that they use that you just said, indigenous. When they use that term, I personally can't stand that term when it's used specifically to describe American Indian people. But it's a hot term that everybody's using today. It's PC. It's politically correct. It's the next politically correct term to be used outside of Native American. At one point, especially I still talk to a lot of elder tribal citizens who call themselves Indians, don't have a problem with being called Indian. And then as time has progressed and things, political correctness has taken over, especially in like the 70s, that's where you start seeing this term Native Americans being used, right? And so that generation has grabbed on to that term Native Americans. But again, with anything, that term was co-opted by fake people or people that were just on purpose co-opting it. Like I've heard people that are just citizens of the United States that say they're Native American because they were born in the United States. They're Native American and they're pushing that term in the same sense that real Native Americans are Native American. Understand what I'm saying? That's why it's confusing. Same way with indigenous. It's just the next step in the new political correctness term to be used. And the reason why I think that it's dangerous is because people use it to be coy, to be, to pull the wool over people's eyes. You know what I mean? Everyone is indigenous to this earth. Everyone on this earth is indigenous to some place, So anyone on this earth can be called indigenous. And truthfully, they are, because everybody's indigenous to somewhere. And so the reason, and I kind of maybe jumping ahead about why CFT specifically chooses to use the term American Indian as opposed to indigenous or Native American, is that, again, fall back on that Code of Federal Regulations that I talked about, the federal laws that create American Indian people as a political status people with certain rights and treaty stipulations and sovereignty and all that are all tied to those laws, is that in that Code of Federal Regulations, that is the legal term that American Indian people are classified as Indians or American Indians. That's the legal term that is used in the federal courts, in all of these courts that deal with American Indian law and Indian issues, period. It's that legal term. So that is why we have chosen to use that term when we are collectively talking about tribal communities across the United States. And that's really what we're talking about here, is tribal communities across the United States. We're not talking about indigenous tribes in the Amazon in South America whose history is not relevant to the Ohio River Valley. You know what I mean? That's another point that needs to be put out there, is that Caesars Fort Theater, we're doing the work in the Ohio River Valley. And so our interest and our focus is on tribes whose historic homelands are in the Ohio River Valley, right? So we're not going to go out, we're not going to ask a Yakima from Oregon or Washington State what their opinion is on the history of the Ohio River Valley, or they have no business speaking on issues that pertain to tribes that were forcibly removed from Ohio. Just like tribes from Ohio have no business speaking about issues that affect them out there, in South Dakota or, Oregon or Arizona, you know what I mean? They're completely different areas that are a lot of times completely different cultures. And there's not one pan-Indianism shoe that fits across the United States. And so that's why it's very important to be specific about who we're talking about, who we're engaging with when we talk about history, and especially east of the Mississippi River, in particular. And so that's what we want to focus on. But when we discuss, the general, American Indian people would preferably be called what their tribe they belong to. That's your first preference. But when you're speaking about a group of people from various tribes in a collective, that's when we will use the term American Indian, because you're not distinguishing what tribe they belong to, but they belong to a federally recognized tribe in the United States. So those are the issues with using the terms indigenous and American Indian and Native American and all of that. And so from someone from the outside, that can all be very confusing if you don't understand those points that I just mentioned, the particulars of that, and why we are very specific about who we are working with in regards to whose homelands are in the areas that we're involved with,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when organizations, like, for example, when they want to do a celebration of Native American culture for that weekend, right? Like in Ohio, like maybe it's a step in the right direction to have somebody that's I'm just going to use the Navajo for this argument's sake. If you have somebody come to Southwest Ohio who's a Navajo Nation citizen, speak to educate the public about the culture, historic culture here in Ohio. I mean, that's better than a pretendian, I would assume. But I mean, it's not really relevant to the culture of a tribal person whose tribe is historically from Southwest Ohio, right? It's just kind of a generic solution to something that could actually be beneficial if you specifically target the proper representation of that culture. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to explain to people, don't just, like, that's great if you're making those steps to have an actual American Indian, involvement in your organization, but let's go another step. What's stopping you from contacting somebody from the absentee Shawnee tribe? What's stopping you from working with CFT, whose whole goal is to provide that representation, so that we're not just using this collective term over and over again? So it's not a one-to-one comparison, but it's like, if you want to learn about British history, why would you bring in an Italian, to do that sort of thing? I mean, like, we wouldn't do that, so just apply the same standards to this, so hopefully moving forward that evolves.
Those are great points. And the only thing I would just add, to go back to that term indigenous, just to kind of clarify it, so people could succinctly understand it, is that every American Indian person is indigenous, but every indigenous person is not an American Indian, period. That's all you have to, end with on that.
Yeah. And one more thing I'll add to that, from my experience trying to, like, coordinate some of these efforts through CFT, I think Pretendians have a knack of, and Defendians, of getting involved with organizations, and the organizations can use their involvement to kind of like justify that lack of effort to find proper representation, right? So it just kind of feeds itself, and it's hard to really convince people that you're pursuing something that's just patently flawed. It's It's not ever going to lead you to a place where it's accurate cultural representation. So really, it just, a lot of these standards have to be lifted and really communicated well by the proper person. And the only way to do that is to do the kind of stuff we're doing, and that's to actually have tribal citizens from the proper tribes whose historic history is involved with this region to be directly in front of the mic, so we'll continue to work on that. Do you, well, real quick, if you would, please remember to mute your mic if you jump on. We appreciate you attending. But for some reason, this was, when you jump on initially, it's not automatically muted. So it's probably my bad. I'm sorry. But Jeremy, do you have any more to add to the Defendian subject before we move on to really what is reface and performing arts?
No, I think we've covered it pretty good.
Okay. All right. So reface in terms of performing arts has a tradition here in Ohio, in the Ohio River Valley, that has gone back for decades, if not a century or two. And again, this is something that I grew up with, going to outdoor dramas, going to frontier fairs and things of that nature, living history events, where you see somebody, to kind of paint the picture of this experience. You go into a play or you go into a historic reenactment, where people are dressed up, like Shawnees or Delawares or Wyandots. And you get a little closer to them and you realize they're wearing wigs that look like cavemen. They've got, everything about them is represented in a cliche, stereotypical way, from costuming to language, with, exaggerated sign language and whatnot. This has been the culture here in Ohio for at least 50 years. And it's something that I've referred to as the Alan Eckert culture. And if you're not familiar with Alan Eckert, he was an author. Coincidentally, lived in my hometown of Bellefontaine, Ohio, and he was famous. He won a Pulitzer Prize for his book, The Frontiersman. And essentially, these books were they're fictional pieces that were then interpreted as historical works, and unfortunately, it has caused a lot of issues with our understanding in Ohio of accurate history and really professional documentation of our history. So, because of the popularity of his work, it is more or less the majority opinion of things such as he popularized the fictional story that Marmaduke Van Swearingen, a white Virginian, became the Shawnee war chief Blue Jacket or Way of Pearsonwa. And we know through DNA testing and just basic historical research that was never true. It was just his imagination that created that storyline. And because of the popularity, again, the popularity of his books, they grew. And the outdoor drama Blue Jacket came about in the 1980s, I believe. And this took place in Greene County. And I attended it as a kid. And, Bellefontaine, Ohio was a place where Blue Jacket had a residence at one time. So, you want to, as a kid, you want to see these things. And, again, it corrupted our culture of the true understanding and our basic abilities to recognize who is actually Shawnee and have even the potential of developing those relationships. It harmed all of that. And so, unfortunately, this sort of entertainment still happens today. It's become less and less common, but we still have it today. And, Jeremy and I have talked to some of the folks that produce these things. I I sincerely believe that they don't believe they're personally producing a racist or negative production because they're storytelling. That's their perception. Jeremy, what you know maybe I should just play the trailer so everyone has an idea of what we're talking about. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to try to share this again. If it doesn't work, I'll shut it off and we'll just go back to the discussion. But this is a trailer from 4 years ago that Tecumseh, the outdoor drama, produced as kind of like a promotional thing. So let me see if I can get this to work.
Kane, the film is not rolling.
All right, so sorry, I just got feedback. It's not coming through again. So I apologize. And maybe for some people, it's better you don't see it anyway. But
Well, we could talk about just the photo. I mean, I'm sure everyone could see the still shot before it would even play.
all right.
And I had no idea what the heck they were trying to depict with that performance. Just from that still shot of that photo, it was absolutely horrible. Horrible.
So I'm going to get your reaction real quick because I know that you've seen that trailer, Jeremy. I want to give a little bit of context to this performance. It's a 50-year-old play. Okay, it was written by Alan Eckert over 50 years ago, and they still produce the same storyline. Essentially, they've made claims that they've worked with the absentee Shawnee tribe. That hasn't been confirmed to my knowledge in recent times anyway. So that's kind of, where they're at with that production. So Jeremy, what is your reaction to that outdoor drama or any outdoor drama that's portraying, Shawnee history without a single Shawnee person anywhere in the county?
Yeah, it's wrong. Number one, it's wrong. It needs to stop. That, like you said, that's based on a 50-year-old script that was, I would assume, I think bad when it was written originally, and even worse so now with the information that we know, about real history that happened in the area, especially with Tecumseh. So you got to scrap that whole thing and go right back to the drawing board. Number one, you need to actually engage. If you really want to create an outdoor drama, you got to base it on some historical accuracy. So, we know that there are going to be some holes in the historical record that, to create a flowing drama, you're probably going to have to fill in. But, you should try to fill those in with at least believable stuff if you can, based on what we do know about history. And so a whole new script needs to be written for that, that would engage actual, historical experts that know about the time period. No, the clothing is absolutely hideous and insane as far as 18th century material culture. It's just really nothing good I could say at all about it, unfortunately. And once you get that new script, you have to, as an organization, like CFT has done and committed to us, you have to commit to filling those roles that are American Indian roles by bona fide American Indian people, period, which is something that, we're seeing being called out in Hollywood a lot more and more today. You're seeing that for every ethnicity in Hollywood. People are making, noise about the wrong ethnic group of people being cast in certain roles that are supposedly be portraying a certain ethnic group, or political group or whatever. And so we have to hold American Indian people to that same status, that whole realm of acting and Hollywood needs to be held to that same standard as well. And I'm thankful that people like Jake Tiger and Mo Brings Plenty, and there are others that see this as valuable and are striving to do just that. I know, talking with Jake, that he and Mo are actually, working. They're in the process of trying to put together a casting agency for Hollywood and different places that do, performing arts like that, for real American Indian people to be involved in, so that when an agency or a production company calls their casting company looking for American Indian actors, they're going to get legitimate tribal citizens, American Indian tribal citizens from federally recognized tribes that are involved with their organization. And that's what we need. That's what's not happening right now.
Yeah, there's definitely an important I would say that is the priority, because the way that experience happens at a historic outdoor drama is that you watch the show, right? And then after the show, you as you're leaving, the cast will be there at the exit to meet the audience members, right? And they've come out of character, okay? And that experience makes everything about whatever you're trying to suppose as an educator through theater just become total fantasy, because nobody in the cast are American Indian actors, right? So at the very least, if we're able to upgrade these casts with American Indian actors, at least a couple, like do something, then you at least have somebody there that can speak intelligently to the culture, and not just be an actor that has no clue about what they're actually portraying. It and again, this isn't easy. We found out firsthand, and I'm glad you brought up that idea of the casting agency, because that's what needs to happen. All these organizations, these production companies need to know where to go to find American Indian actors, so that they have like it's a basic way of just networking and fulfilling this duty. To your point about the scripts, I know outdoor dramas, they don't claim to be educational, they claim to be just storytellers. So, I think we can speak to, there is power in entertainment in real history. And, like where that Tecumseh Outdoor Drama is performed, it's outside of Chillicothe, Ohio, and the American town Chillicothe. And we know that Tecumseh and Blue Jacket and Roundhead, and I believe there was another gentleman there, Ruddell was there as an interpreter, went to a council there in Chillicothe in 1807, and spoke to the townspeople in Chillicothe about trying to keep the peace. He supposedly visited Thomas Worthington's house, and we don't have a lot of details about that, but that was supposedly the mission from in 1807, to keep the peace there. And that's a real chapter of our history that happened, and it's nowhere in that play, right? We've talked about how there's a connection currently happening with that storyline in that play with what's happening now it with Greene County history and this mythological connection between the Galloway family and Tecumseh. And if you're not familiar, James Galloway was in George Rogers Clark's army that invaded Shawnee land and the community and really acted on behalf of Thomas Jefferson, the governor of Virginia at the time, and an ethnic cleansing of the area, burning Shawnee towns and attacking women and children. Galloway was in that army and later came back in 17 years later in 1797 to build his home and to settle in the area. And then the mythology evolved with Alan Eckert and some other folks before him to tell this story that Tecumseh would come down and hang out, at his house and created this relationship. And so Alan Eckert chose to put that in the storyline as a love interest for Tecumseh, so, all this mythology and storytelling is typically okay, in my opinion, but when it comes to American Indian history, specifically where American Indian history involves this ethnic cleansing episodes and horrible tragedies, there's a greater responsibility, in my opinion, to do that in a more professional manner and to work hand in hand with tribal citizens of that specific tribe and listen. So maybe we'll just segue, Jeremy, right to what we're doing and get out of this subject. So that's essentially how Jeremy and I met each other, is that originally I wanted to do a new historic outdoor drama in the Miami Valley, which is Southwest Ohio. And I wanted to do it in a accurate way that was responsible, involving tribal citizens and casting and whatever layer we could get their involvement with. And so I wrote a script, and the next step was to get a consultation with a tribal person to get feedback, to get coverage. And so what I did was I was recommended by at that time, Tim Haney was our president. He recommended I reach out to the Ohio History Connection. And at that time, the American Indian representative for the Ohio History Connection was Stacy Half Moon. And Stacy, fortunately, had the wherewithal to put me in contact with Jeremy. And Jeremy read my script, and we started working together. Specifically, the script was about Caesar, who was a formerly enslaved Black man that was marooned with Ohio tribes in the late 18th century. And we know through our research since then that he was an interpreter and really interesting person. And in my opinion, a great character to kind of use as the vehicle to tell the history of what happened here as almost like a third party perspective. So that's what I ran with as far as the storyline's concerned. And then Jeremy started consulting with me about the accuracy of it. And the very first thing that I recognized that I had to be able to withstand was criticism, right? That's what a lot of people in my chair don't want to deal with, because we don't want to admit that maybe we're doing something incorrectly. This is very personal when we write something that we feel like is important work, and we really care about the characters we write, and then turn around and somebody says, this is trash, Not that Jeremy called it trash, but he definitely opened my eyes to a lot of things that I just was ignorant to and I needed that education. So, from there, we decided quickly that format of the old format, the Tecumseh, the Blue Jacket outdoor format, was probably not going to work, just for many reasons. Language being the first barrier, with the audience not understanding Shawnee language, the Algonquin speaking tribes would be impossible for Ohio audiences to understand. So we quickly pivoted to film. And in our first year of working together, we produced a short film, which I intended to share on here, but if you go to our website, cftohio.org, you can click down on the page that says our work. That drop down, it has films, and you'll see the Caesar, an American Maroon film, which is about 10 minutes. And that's the first work that Jeremy and I did together. So I'll turn it over to you, Jeremy. Take us back to us in the pre-production stages of getting ready for that, and how you pulled together the cast for that short film, and then how we pulled it off. And I'll jump in and share my, perspective as a director on that.
Sure. Well, when Kane first contacted me, and he told me who he was and what he was interested in doing, and I had him send me a copy of the script. I didn't call it, horse crap, but there were quite a few misconceptions, stereotypes, not understanding real history in there that, we immediately had to set about correcting, And so I shared a lot of historical documents with Kane, primary accounts and stuff like that, and let him read them, and then we would discuss those accounts that he had read, and then we set about to rework the script based on these historical narratives and what we could sleuth out of the 18th century, and then also weaving in other cultural mindsets that we still think about and practice today in our communities. And we tried to do the best that we could and make an accurate film based on weaving both the primary documents together with oral history and different cultural teachings today that we still, like I said, we still operate by. So in doing that, I told Kane, I said, well, the only way I will agree to get involved with this is if you agree that all American Indian roles will be only filled by actual tribal citizens from our communities. And immediately he agreed to that. He was he said that's exactly what he wanted. That's what he wanted to do. And so once we had committed to that, and we started working on the script, then we set about to start trying to cast roles and stuff. And we used people that I knew and from our communities back in Oklahoma, who I thought would do a good job and fit the roles well. We also used at that time he was still working at Colonial Williamsburg as an American Indian interpreter there at Colonial Williamsburg. Cody Grant, we used him in the film, and then another friend of ours, DJ Huff, who's a member of the Seneca Nation up in New York. We used, both of them were in the film, and at that point in time, my son-in-law, Talon Silverhorn, was still working at Colonial Williamsburg as an American Indian interpreter there, but was unhappy with Colonial Williamsburg and the state that the American Indian Initiative had fallen into, which had caused my daughter Michelle to leave Colonial Williamsburg a year prior to that, basically. And she had moved back home to Indiana with us. And so Talon had stayed that extra year, and things had continued to deteriorate. They were starting to hire exactly what we're talking about, people that were not tribal citizens who were claiming to have American Indian ancestry who didn't, to fill those roles at Colonial Williamsburg as American Indian interpreters. And they also, up until that point, I had worked at Colonial Williamsburg. That's how Talon got the job there. I got Talon involved and brought him out there when he was in high school to do a program with us called So Far from the Scioto. at Williamsburg. There was like 20 of us that I took from our community out there to do that weekend program. Talon was one of them. And from there, we talked with the director of the initiative at that time, Buck Woodard, and got Talon hired that summer as soon as he graduated to work there. And as soon as, Buck left there, my daughter left there, they started hiring people that weren't American Indians to fill those roles and to be the director of that program. Well, they quit actually engaging with actual tribal communities to do programming there. So at that point, up till then, they had engaged with all three of our Shawnee tribes. We're doing a great job, a fantastic job, and working with the three federally recognized Shawnee tribes to produce some of the programs that they were doing. They were doing the same with the Cherokee, three federally recognized Cherokee communities. They were having, Shawnee programming there. They were having Cherokee programming there. And then, again, all of that quit when Buck left and new people took over. They quit engaging with, the historic tribes that came to Williamsburg and interacted there. Again, like I said, Talon was unhappy with his position, wanted to leave. And so I talked to Kane. I said, hey, why don't we bring Talon here to Ohio, get him on board, see if he's this is a way for him to get out of Virginia. And so Kane agreed. And Kane graciously and his wife Stephanie, they allowed Talon to move in to their house with him and live with him. And Kane helped him move from Virginia to Ohio, and we immediately got him involved in historical programming with CFT.
All right, hold on. You're getting ahead of yourself.
Okay,
let's talk about the film.
Okay.
So,
well,
I asked so let me interject real quick. So we were filming back behind the stage where the old Blue Jacket outdoor drama, the red face drama, used to be portrayed. And I told Jeremy, I said, the last thing I'm doing is having a white guy dress up like Blue Jacket. I need a Blue Jacket. And Jeremy's like, oh, don't worry about it. I got the guy. Right. So enter Talon, right? And then we started rehearsals as a group. And one of the main things that I wanted to highlight in this film was Shawnee language. I felt like if we could not only have like the cast involved with American Indian casting, but then just keep taking it a step further and further as far as we can go with this little film, which by the way was only we only had 2 days to shoot it, and it was all outdoors, and we only had $8,000 to do this. Okay, so we were shooting for the moon on all of this stuff, and I think we pulled it off. But let me back up. As we're going through the rehearsal process, we did everything on Zoom because Talon was down in Virginia. The guy playing Caesar, Vince Mormon, is up here in Ohio. A couple of the other actors are up here in Ohio. Jeremy is in Indiana. The only way we could rehearse this, again, because we only had 2 days to shoot it, was to do it through Zoom. And plus it was COVID times. Okay. So we had all of these factors going into this, and we had settled on a scene where Blue Jacket was questioning Caesar's honesty, essentially, and it all came from a sketch narrative by John McDonald, where he said that Kenton told him as the author that it was Caesar who told him how to survive the gauntlet run at Chillicothe along the Little Miami River. So I adapted this scene to portray, in our opinion, what would happen if Blue Jacket or the Shawnee were to find out about this act that Caesar gave Simon Kenton, and coming back at the same time. This is September 1778. They would have been coming back from an attack on Boonesboro down in Kentucky. So that kind of set the stage for this scene. And so let's jump forward, Jeremy. We came in and we stayed at the hotels, and you guys show up at the park early in the morning. I had my camera crew of college kids there, right? They'd shot music videos for the last couple years, and we that's kind of what we could afford, and I figured, all right, we'll get this done. And they're great to work with, by the way. They did excellent work with that film and the Dunbar film. But then we get there and we're all coming together. And for me personally, I'm kind of anxious because I've never met all these folks in the cast in person. And frankly, I just didn't know very many American Indians, to be honest. And so I thought going into this, because the history of this was kind of heavy, that this whole group, this whole scene would be fairly somber and serious and, real dedicated to the moment, and not the way it ended up. So, Jeremy, walk us through exactly, what it's like to be on set with CFT and working with this crew.
Well, to kind of piggyback on what Kane said, he was anxious. He was, worried we were going to be able to get it all filmed in the 2 days, and worried about staying on time and all of that, which is something for anyone that's worked with American Indian people. You have to understand that you're never going to be on time. Period. That's just the way it is. The joke is, you're working on Indian time, which is we'll do it when we're ready. So that was already, an issue or a hurdle, I guess, that Kane had to jump and understand and get used to. But like you said, we come in there and we're getting all of our gear on, and we got 3 or 4 guys that are half naked and just a breeze cloud, or getting painted up and outside, and just the joking really is a big thing. We're just teasing each other and joking around, and it's a really, really fun time, really, where we just get to be with one another and interact and have a good time. And he obviously, it was not what Kane was used to, was working on any kind of filming and stuff. So I would say it's probably a little bit different than most film productions, where there's a lot more joking, I think, and teasing that goes on these kind of filming shoots or photo shoots, all of that. So I think that's what he's referencing, and I think that's one thing that was the biggest eye opener for him, and one thing that I think he's came to appreciate it now at this point, now that he understands it. And we include him in the jokes as well, and we don't leave him out now, and he gets pulled in there and teased, just like he's one of us,
Yeah. Immediately I was struck with, oh man, everybody knows each other, for the most part. You're familiar, you're kind of friends. It's like there's a camaraderie there. Juxtapose that with my experience making the Dunbar film in the Dunbar house. Really intense, dramatic day of shooting. Super emotional. Had tears in my eyes several times. Contrast that with the Caesar film. I had to yell at people to stop laughing off cameras several times. Jeremy's one son's throwing walnuts into the scene from behind the camera. Like I had to control this environment while the camera was rolling. Otherwise, we weren't going to get anything. So, it was.
And we had a horse accident.
Oh yeah, how can I forget? Yeah. So we had a local person in Greene County bring their horse, Jillian, and she was fantastic. She actually, the same horse was in the Colonel Young film as well later on, and the horse's name is Lucky. So of course we had an accident with Lucky. Talon fell off Lucky going full gallop, and I about had a heart attack. I was mortified watching it happen, and thankfully he's young and was able to fight his way through his bruises there. But and of course none of that made the film. I burnt all of that. Never want to
Whatever.
seriously
tell him what the reaction to my wife, to Shannon, was to Talon as he was trying to pick himself up off the ground.
I can't use the language, but she, he's dusting himself off, and Shannon grew up, in the Southwest where there's rocks and no grass and stuff, and she said, "Don't be I'll use the term crybaby. Don't be a crybaby. You fell on grass. You don't know anything about falling off a horse, with in the desert." So again, I immediately saw like, okay, this is funny. Like this is really, I'm trying to make a history piece, but I should probably be making a comedy with this crew. Um, and to be honest, to this day, I still wrestle with that. I still wrestle with, man, there's something to be said to make a comedy out of these serious things to help educate people. But I love drama, and I think it's effective when it's done the right way. Um, we pulled it off in 2 days. Fortunately, thank God we had good weather. The parks were great. We worked with Greene County Parks and Trails and the Clark County Park District, a little north of there here in Clark County. And overall, it was, a really enjoyable experience to set this whole thing in motion for me personally. And thank goodness the rest of the people that had the main voices of CFT felt the same way. Tim Haney was the president at that time. He had been keeping CFT going for years without really any major productions, with the hopes that one day it would happen. And then once we made the Caesar film, we quickly made the realization this is an opportunity to do the right thing. This is an opportunity to break off away from the Blue Jackets and the Tecumsehs and do it in a new way with Shawnee citizens, and whoever else we can pull in on the cast and our leadership, to make this a real American Indian-led organization and do it the right way. So and it didn't happen overnight. I mean, we're still working at it, and now we have evolved. So all but one of our members, Tim, stepped down as president. He's the treasurer and secretary, but all the rest of our board trustees are American Indians, and so we have really made the commitment to not just do what's entertaining or easy. I'll use / easy. We've really made the commitment to do the hard work to change this culture and be part of the solution. So, I think in the future, ideally, we'll continue to use film, because as you'll see in the Caesar film, we use the Shawnee language. You can subtitle film. You don't have to have like a device in the script to interpret it for the audience. You can just, put it directly on the screen. And I think in the future, that's really what I want to do, and as a way to continue to grow this. And then right now, we also have goals to also produce a living history tour that incorporates more educational aspects with theatrics. So that's a bigger budget item that we have a long-term goal with, that we hope to produce. And Jeremy, let me just ask you, like right now, what are you most excited about for this upcoming year with CFT and what we've got cooking?
Well, we've got already 2 events on the books for engaging in living history interpretation, which is another arm of CFT that we've created. The living history portion of it, besides the drama and the filming, besides the living history tour that we hope to one day be able to produce when we get the casting right and the funding right and all of that. One thing that we can do right now that is easier to start up, and that we can really incorporate a lot of tribal citizens from various communities from Ohio River Valley tribes is this living history portion, and we have 2 of those scheduled for this year right now. The first one will be in June. It's June 8th, I think, through the 10th. It will be out in New York, the state of New York, in the Mohican and Muncie historical area along the Hudson River at a place called Historic Huguenot Street. This will be the 3rd year that we've went out there and done that. And each year it keeps growing with participants from the 5 Delaware or Lenape communities who are in Oklahoma. There are 2 in Oklahoma. There's 1 in Wisconsin, and then there are 2 in Canada. And so this year we'll have members of our living history group that are there from every one of those 5 Delaware communities that'll be participating. So really excited about that. I'm very thankful to Historic Huguenot Street and their staff. They're very gracious to us. They provide all of the travel for everyone. They also, we work up contracts with each of the participants and make sure that our folks are taken care of and that we have nice places to stay while we're out there. So I'm very grateful to Kara and her staff there at Historic Huguenot Street. And in September, we'll be going out to Virginia, taking a little bit of a smaller group. We're going to the Yorktown Museum of the American Revolution, which is in Virginia there near Williamsburg. And I'm very thankful to Travis Henline for, getting this going out there at his museum where he's in charge of that museum. And we're currently working right now, getting our travel fares and all of that squared away for that event in September. And we're going to be portraying basically a Shawnee community, or, just a Shawnee camp during Lord Dunmore's War, basically 1774. So we'll be talking about the history that surrounded the Shawnee people during Lord Dunmore's War of 1774, showing not only everyday life with women and kids, but also, talking about the warrior role. Obviously, that was a time in history when we were at war with the Virginians. So we'll be talking about that warrior's role and some other things. So we're looking forward to doing that as well. And then, like Kane said, we have been talking about producing another film. And I think we really need to focus on that. And I see a kind of a bigger film than what we did for the Caesar film, especially where we could get more tribal members involved in it. And also I can, one of the things that I want to do is reach out and incorporate more of the friends that I have and that already do living history, that are in the living history realm, and do really good portrayals of various frontiersmen, or even, one of the roles that we want to highlight is, and one that was a big part of 18th century life for American Indian communities was, adopted captives, like we talked about for Caesar. There were numerous European and African-American adoptees that were fully, incorporated into American Indian communities and had families and, intermarried and all of that. Some of them returned to their European families, and some of them stayed with us all the way to Oklahoma, and descendants, are still there today of these captives. And so that's a role that we want to showcase as, African American and white captives among the communities. So I will hopefully be reaching out to some of our friends that do have really good portrayals of those topics, or, those personas, and getting them involved in whether we're doing the filming that we're talking about or more living history, at historic sites. The one thing that I would say about that is the only caveat is that, as we're saying, only American Indians should be doing American Indian interpretation. The role that non-American Indians can fill in this adopted captive role should, everyone out there shouldn't just take this as, oh, that's my way into doing living history. And so we got a million white adopted captives, and they're running around all these living history events without any real American Indians, at these events. And so that's not something that we want to see. The role of an adopted captive, is really only relevant in the community of American Indian people, right? So these roles should only be done hand in hand with actual American Indian portrayals by American Indian people. Is the point I really want to make, and there are folks that have committed to doing that, So I'm grateful for that. So those are three of the things that that I see us doing in the near future, this next year.
Yeah. I mean,
I just,
as far as casting and some of those things, again, go to our website. We do have a casting call up there. You can also see examples. We did a photography project that serves as a storyboard for the planned production that we have, Shawnee History Tour. So you can go to our website, cftohio.org, and check out all those examples. If you see something or you think of something that strikes you, that you know somebody that's an actor, or maybe they want to get involved with acting, send them the link. We really appreciate it. Reach out to us. There's different ways you can contact us there on that website. We'll know here probably within 30 to 60 days if we'll be able to go into production for this, the planned production Shawnee Living History Tour for this fall. And so, fingers crossed that we benefit from the generosity of those endowments. Last year was successful in that regard, so we're hoping that we get the same kind of support. Also, you can donate individually on our website if it strikes you as well. And volunteering, we ask for volunteers to help us with networking, fundraising, however you can help us. You can contact us through that website. Or if another thing, I think I mentioned it previously, but there's research that's represented on that website too. So if you want more information about where these storylines and where this research might come from, we have links on there that I think I've got, somewhere like 20 up there now. So a lot of information. Jeremy, I was going to jump into a few of these questions, before, because we're running out of time here. People are kind of peeling off.
Yep.
And we really appreciate everyone joining us. Again, we'll have a link to this for YouTube that we'll put on Facebook that everyone can go back and watch. I might edit out the beginning. It started off a little bit rough, but we'll have that up and running here as soon as I can get to it. I'm going to start working backwards with the most recent question from David. Would it be acceptable for an enrolled tribal citizen of one nation to portray a historical figure from another nation? That's a really good question. Jeremy, why don't you take that first?
Yeah, that is a good question. And I would say, yes, it is appropriate as long as that person is educated and is mentored by someone that is from the tribe that the person is, the portrayal should be about, and is knowledgeable about the history and the cultural etiquette and all that kind of stuff, that can mentor that person and make sure their portrayal is historically accurate. So yes, that is a good question, and it is appropriate because, frankly, our communities are very small, and that we're not always going to be able to find a person to fit a role that is from the tribe that they are portraying. I mean, that's just the unfortunate truth about it. That's just the way it is, right? So we do have to be able to reach out to other tribal communities and, find people that fit those roles appropriately. So good question.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak from like a director, playwright perspective. I mean, ideally, yes, you'd want that voice to be as all the way close to pinpoint authentic as possible, so that those ideas can be shared, and that's essentially why Jeremy and I are working together, specifically with that Shawnee Living History Tour planned production. because Jeremy is a Shawnee citizen, right? So he can kind of guide that process, whether it's writing, directing, rehearsals. If somebody has a question, I can rely on Jeremy for support on that. But yeah, that's an excellent question. It's come up in the past. I would venture to say when it comes to the educational aspect of what CFT does now, we probably don't want somebody from a different tribe educating the public, with about a different tribe. I think that can, Jeremy, what do you think? Like if there's like a presentation or something along those lines, what's your opinion on that as far as just education is concerned, not theater?
Well, if it's not theater, living history, I think is okay under the circumstance. Like I said, they have a mentor from the tribe, especially, and for example, when we go out to Virginia this fall in September, not everybody that's going is actually Shawnee tribal citizen. We got a Seminole cat that we're dragging along with us to do interpretation as Shawnee. We got a Yuchi cat we're dragging along, but our Yuchi guy knows more about being Delaware and Shawnee than a lot of tribal citizens of those tribes because he's been around those communities his whole life and interacting and all that. So, those are examples of I feel comfortable with those guys doing roles, representing themselves, at that event as portraying a Shawnee. It's appropriate, it's acceptable, and they're going to do a great job. As far as like, I think what you're saying is like talking to the public and not in a living history setting, but maybe more in a formal education setting. Yes, I agree with you. We're going to do our best to have representation from the tribe that, we're talking about, period. That's why it's one of the things that I want to point out is that, so as Kane talked about when we developed the CFT, when we decided that it was going to change from the outdoor drama to an American Indian-led organization, that was something that Kane, myself, Tim talked about, extensively about, changing directions and having CFT be led by American Indians. And we really wanted to talk about American Indians that were linked to the Ohio River Valley. So, my buddy Jason Jones and I had been talking about for years starting our own nonprofit to do just what we're doing right now. And so, we saw this as a perfect opportunity to use CFT in that capacity. And so that's what we decided to do. So Jason's the president of the board, I'm the vice president. And then we set about recruiting people from the various federally recognized tribes whose homeland are in the Ohio River Valley to be on our board, to be board members. And we've done a great job at getting those people. We've got Delaware's on there from 3 of the 5 communities. We've got 3 Shawnee tribe citizens on there. We've got a Tuscarora Nation citizen on there. Who else do we got? I'm trying to think. I think that's it. We got Delaware.
Go to the website if they're on there.
Yeah. You guys can go and check out the website. But we got representation from the big ones from the Ohio River Valley, the big tribes from the Ohio River Valley represented in our board. And so the board is the ones that are steering the decisions that we're making and where we're taking CFT, into the future. So I'm very grateful for all of the board members that agreed, to accept those positions. And it can be a pain sometimes because, doing the things that we do takes a lot of time out of our daily lives and away from our families to focus on a lot of this stuff and the research and making the clothing and all of that. And sometimes you just want some time to yourself, but, I'm thankful that people are committed to this and are willing to do it. So, sorry to get off on a tangent, but I felt that should be mentioned. You know, the other folks that are on our board that are steering us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's become a collaboration, and it's been cool to see develop that way. We had a comment come in, right? Well, I'm gonna read his comment, and then I'm gonna read his question. So Jake Tiger, who we've worked with, in fact, he's one of the models there in our photography project on our website. He portrayed Blue Jacket in the storyboard. Jake works for the Seminole Nation. He said, not only this is in reference to Jeremy talking about the casting agency he wants to develop specifically for American Indian actors. That not only do Mo and I want legitimate natives in film, but respectful natives who represent off camera and are still active in their tribal communities after they land roles. So thought that was a good comment. Again, lifting the standard of all of this, right? Like we're not looking for just titles, right? And then he asked, where can American Indian people source clothing materials they want to get involved in living history? Do you know, Jeremy?
Jake asked that?
Yeah, I think he's just asking, not for himself, but he's asking for
Well, I mean, that's a big answer. You know, that's a lot of answering. I mean, there's not just one. Yeah, there's not just one source. It's complicated and it's hard, and it's something that we're still struggling with. As a board too, to find the right materials, and some of this stuff is just not produced at all today. Period. You just can't get your hands on it. Most of it we have to make ourselves, but we strive to find the basic materials to make it out of that are as close to the historical materials as possible. But you can get on. I don't know if we got any links, but if you're friends with myself or Jason Jones or Jake or any other members of the board that are involved in living history, you can message us where we get certain items from and how we make them or whatever. That's probably the easiest answer to that. But we use sources in living history that are people that are in that realm are knowledgeable about. We use fabrics from Burnley and Trowbridge. We use certain items from Crazy Crow, certain items from various other bead stores on Etsy, or it's just you got to look everywhere. You got to source everywhere.
Right.
So, good question.
Yeah. Hopefully that'll become easier to, satisfy. I'm going to read this quick little back and forth that we had about the term American Indian. Says Shauna Kota. I had no idea there were issues with these distinctions and talking about these terms we discussed. It's really good to hear what the preference is. I've always steered clear of using American Indian because it seems politically charged and Indian being harmful because of the origin of error, but it makes total sense how indigenous and native can be misused. I've seen both co-opted regularly by white folks. Robert then commented, I don't like American in it. Tribes predate America. I prefer Turtle Island. And then she said, yeah, that's exactly the kind of association I feel is politically charged and problematic. But in regards to combating the pretendian problem, sticking to the legal term does make the most sense. I just thought that was an interesting little side conversation.
Yep, I think that's nails it right on the head there. That back and forth, it nails that right on the head. And the term American Indian, is it the best description of American Indian people? No, because the best description would be whatever tribe the person belongs to, just like I said, period. But collectively, is it the best description? Yes, it is. And the reason some people are maybe a little squeamish about the term Indian is because it can be used negatively, just like any term can be used negatively. That's a pejorative term. It's all in the delivery. It really is, and it's the mentality of the person using the term, the way that they're intending it, that makes it charged or innocent. You know what I mean? So that's the point of using those terms that aren't the best descriptions for a person from a specific tribe, but you got to have a term for somebody, for the communities collectively. You got to have some term. You know what I mean? You can't go through 578 terms, when you introduce every tribe, period. So that's the way it is.
Yeah, I was about to say that, yeah, ideally the tribal representation should be referred to, but to speak the same language, we just English groups everything. So I mean, it's just kind of what it is. Let me see. I'm sorry if I missed something here, but I'm just kind of like cherry picking a few that stick out. Ursus says Pretendians use their white privilege to gain access, and often once they have a platform, they will invite a native person to speak with them or join an org with them because it validates them. That's very true. I see this a lot in Vermont. They don't invite native people to join them because they're interested in making sure they have the platform, but because it serves them, it validates them. And then Robert had a good comment. He said, the Pretendians get all the benefits, but they don't have any of the trauma from the cultural experience. Yeah, and then it goes into not being able to see the video kind of comments. So, Jeremy, do you have anything that you want to say in closing here? We're way past our time. I appreciate everyone sticking along.
Yeah. No, I just appreciate everybody's tuning in. Obviously there are a lot of people are interested in this topic. It's an evolving thing. We're trying to do the best that we can at Caesars Ford Theater to create more opportunity and to make things better in general and in this realm, and we're trying to do everything that we can to root out some of the issues that, this whole topic brings for tribal communities. And so I hope we can continue to do that. I hope we can be valuable in doing that. I would say to anybody in the audience that is from a historic site that wants to get involved and have more appropriate representation at their site, I would say a couple of things you can do. On our website, we have a link to all of the federally recognized tribes whose homelands were in Ohio, the Ohio River Valley. So I'm not just talking about the state of Ohio. I'm talking about every state that touches the Ohio River. So Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky. Those are the areas that I'm talking about. If you want to get the tribal citizens involved, I would say you could reach out to the tribe that had towns in your historical sites area through the links on our website. I would reach out to them and ask for inclusion, ask them to, tell them what you're wanting to do, ask them for participation. I will say caveat with this is that some tribes do have educational outreach and cultural programs that they are willing to provide. Some of them have, cultural historic preservation offices that will provide that. But a lot do not, a lot don't do that type of programming, and none, to my knowledge, really do living history type programming. They don't really provide that. And unless it's Jake from the Seminole Nation, I think he's about the only one that does living history type programming from his nation. But some tribes, like the Chickasaw Nation, they have a dance troupe that is cultural programming, and some tribes have offerings like that. I know the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, they have the Warriors of Anikadua that do cultural outreach, you know what I mean? So you can try to get them involved. Or if you specifically want historical type interpretation, you could reach out to Caesars Ford Theater to do that kind of stuff. But I would say, you know, that's where you start with those links in Caesars Ford Theater. And with that, I would like to really like showcase some of the historic sites that are doing the right thing, that are doing exactly what I just said. You know, they're reaching out to federally recognized communities, only engaging federally recognized communities, only having federally recognized people do interpretations at their sites. And that's the gold standards. If your site's not doing that, you should be doing that. You should be looking to these other sites and what they're doing, and change your ways and model it after these sites. So with that, I'll name a few of them that I think are doing great work and are kind of leading the charge in the historical site department. First is Historic Huguenot Street, like I talked about, there in New York. Also, the American Revolution Museum at Yorktown in Virginia. Fort Dobbs State Historic Site in North Carolina is doing great work with tribal citizens. Indiana State Museum, and particularly the old French House, is doing great work here in Indiana with only engaging tribal citizens. The Frontier Culture Museum in Virginia, doing good work. Ganondagan historic site there in New York, they're doing really good work as well up there. The Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia, Fort Pitt Museum in Pittsburgh, and Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Western Pennsylvania. Those sites are the gold standards of historic sites doing things with tribal communities and tribal citizens. And like I said, I would highly encourage anybody from a historic site to model your actions and programming after those sites that I just mentioned. So thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, it's important to really highlight the folks that are already doing this the right way. We're not reinventing the wheel here, are we? You know, we're just we're trying to improve what's around this area in Ohio and then throughout the Ohio River Valley. One relationship, one connection at a time. So far, we have built some good relations with local park systems here. Some endowments in Dayton, the Ohio Humanities, Ohio Arts Council, the Greene County Development Committee. You know, and I know I'm missing a few, so I apologize if I missed you, but we have a lot of support. And I think as we keep going and we keep showcasing, you know, the benefits that the audience can have by coming and enjoying our programming or our shows or films, this is going to continue to grow. So real quick here before we jump off, we had a couple comments that popped up about the questions that were in there. David wrote, historicaltextiles.com is a place to go and look for material goods. And then Jake had a question about, you know, where to find accurate research, primary sources. Again, one place you can go is our website, cftohio.org. If you click on the drop down Our Work and then click on Research, you'll see some links there. And most of it pertains specifically to mid to late 18th century here in the Ohio River Valley, and what we were kind of focused on as interpreters, or in my case, as a writer director. So thank you very much, Jeremy. Are we good here, sir?
Yeah, I think we're good. Like I said, I appreciate everybody's attentiveness, and I know it was a long discussion, but I think it's one that people are really interested in, and I hope that together we can just continue to build and do great things in the future. So again, thanks everyone for coming.
Exactly. I'll second that. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And again, as soon as I can get this up on YouTube, I'll share it on Facebook. It'll also be again on the website. And then you guys can give us your feedback from there. Let us know what your feedback is of the website as well. It's important that we have an understanding of your perspective and what you want to see and what you want to see more of. So thanks, everyone, and have a great weekend. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day. you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a great day.
All right.